What if some of the most iconic cities and monuments on Earth weren't just locations in history, but actual gateways to parallel universes? The idea of alternate dimensions has fascinated scientists, with many suggesting that certain ancient and modern sites could be more than meets the eye. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Lost City of Z. Have you ever heard of the Lost City of Z? This legendary place has been a source of fascination for explorers for over a century. Picture this: British explorer Percy Harrison Fawcett, completely obsessed with finding this mythical city believed to be hidden deep in the Amazon jungle. In 1925, Fawcett, his son, and a companion ventured into the jungle and vanished. Gone without a trace. Now people think the Lost City of Z wasn't just about gold, but maybe a super advanced civilization with knowledge way beyond our time. Some even whisper that this city isn't just lost to history, but perhaps tucked away in another dimension, hidden from our everyday view. Locals share eerie stories of energy vortexes and strange disappearances in the Amazon, adding fuel to the fire that the Lost City might exist in a whole other plane of existence. Could it be lost not to time, but to another world entirely? Machu Picchu, perched high in the Peruvian Andes, is more than just an ancient engineering marvel, it's a total head-scratcher. Imagine building something with such impossibly precise stonework, and yet we still don't fully know why it was built. Was it just a religious site, or something more? Some folks believe that the site, with its weird energy fluctuations and its seemingly impossible alignment with the stars, might be a portal to another dimension. Over the years, plenty of visitors have reported feeling time distortions and inexplicable energy surges while wandering through the ruins. Could it be that Machu Picchu's remote location, high in the mountains, holds more than just the secrets of an ancient civilization? Maybe it hides the key to a gateway to realms beyond our own. What do you think? Imagine a city carved into red sandstone cliffs. That's Petra, in Jordan. Once a bustling trade hub, it was mysteriously abandoned by the 7th century. Petra's intricately detailed tombs and temples are undeniably beautiful, but its purpose might be way stranger than we actually realize. Some theorists believe that Petra was a place of immense mystical power, and the very stones that form the city might be part of an ancient mechanism designed to open gateways to other realms. Hidden deep within its structures are caves and tombs, possibly acting as energy conduits to other dimensions. Could Petra have been a city not just of commerce, but of interdimensional significance? The evidence of advanced knowledge found in the city suggests there's more to Petra than meets the eye. Perhaps it's a portal that's been closed off to the world for centuries. It's a fascinating mystery, isn't it? Legend says that deep within the earth, hidden beneath the icy peaks of the Himalayas, lies the mythical underground city of Agartha. Imagine a city that's the last refuge of a super advanced civilization, one that escaped cataclysms that destroyed surface life thousands of years ago. And while no one's found physical evidence yet, many accounts from explorers and spiritual seekers hint at a network of tunnels and hidden pathways beneath the earth leading to this legendary city. Could Agartha be more than just a metaphor for an enlightened society? Could it be a literal underground civilization existing on a different vibrational plane, accessible only to those who know the ancient secrets? Reports of strange mystical experiences in the Himalayas, from sudden shifts in time to mysterious lights, suggest that Agartha may be a gateway to alternate realities. It's a pretty wild idea, right? For centuries, the legend of El Dorado, the fabled city of gold, has lured adventurers deep into the jungles of South America. But what if El Dorado wasn't just a city of wealth, but a portal to another world? Some folks believe that El Dorado's allure wasn't just in its treasure, but in its connection to a highly advanced civilization that may have understood interdimensional travel. Hidden in the thick jungles, the city's precise location remains a mystery, but theories suggest it might exist in a dimension parallel to ours, revealed only to those who possess the right knowledge. The countless expeditions that have vanished without a trace could be due to the city's potential to exist in another realm entirely, a place of hidden knowledge that has been kept secret for millennia. What if all those explorers stumbled into another dimension? Nan Madol, an ancient city built on artificial islands in the middle of a lagoon off the coast of Pompeii, is one of the most mysterious archaeological sites in the entire world. With over 90 islets connected by canals, it's often called the Venice of the Pacific. The city's massive basalt stones and perfectly arranged structures suggest that its builders had knowledge that went way beyond anything seen at the time. Legend says the city was built by twin sorcerers who levitated the stones with the help of a flying dragon. How cool is that? It hints at otherworldly powers for sure. Some people believe that Nan Madol is not just a city lost to time, but a remnant of a civilization that was linked to interdimensional forces. Could it be that Nan Madol is a gateway? One that has been hidden beneath the sea, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself? The largest religious monument in the world, it is not just an architectural marvel, it is a cosmic puzzle. This stunning temple complex, built way back in the 12th century, aligns perfectly with celestial bodies. It makes you wonder if it was designed as a gateway to the heavens, or even a doorway to another dimension. Researchers have long speculated that Angkor Wat wasn't merely a temple to honor Hindu gods, but a metaphysical portal built with advanced knowledge of astronomy and geometry. Its intricate layout and mysterious carvings hint at something far beyond earthly worship, perhaps a means to connect with other realms. The temple's alignment with the stars, especially the constellation of Orion, strengthens the theory that the Khmer Empire may have understood cosmic forces and used them to access higher planes of existence. Could the temple have been a physical bridge to another world? Some believe it was a cosmic conduit, a gateway lost to time but still present in the design, waiting for those who can decipher its secrets. It is definitely mind-blowing to think about. The Great Pyramids are one of history's most enduring mysteries. These colossal structures, built with almost supernatural precision, are aligned with the stars in ways that still baffle us today. The theory that the pyramids are more than just tombs has gained traction over the years. Some suggest they could be portals to other realms, designed to connect our world with higher planes of existence. The mysterious shafts inside the pyramids point towards specific stars, and the discovery of hidden chambers within these ancient monuments has only deepened the mystery. Could the pyramids have been constructed as a kind of interdimensional gateway? Energy readings around the pyramid complex have shown unusual magnetic and electromagnetic activity. This leads some to believe that the pyramids might not just be relics of the past, but functioning devices, channels to another world or dimension. With theories pointing to both advanced ancient knowledge and mysterious energies, the pyramids may hold the key to understanding alternate realities. It's definitely interesting to consider. The Cave of Swallows, located in Mexico, is a deep pit cave with one of the most stunning vertical drops in the world. At 1,093 feet deep, it's the second deepest pit in Mexico, but it's not just its depth that's fascinating. It is the strange, mystical phenomena that surround it. The cave is home to countless birds, including the white-collared swifts that perform an almost ritualistic dive every evening. Watching the swifts plummet downwards, pulling their wings into free fall, is mesmerizing, but it also stirs up some questions. Could this dramatic plunge into the earth be symbolic of a journey between worlds? Local legends suggest that the cave may have served as an entrance to the underworld for ancient cultures, and its overwhelming size and mysterious echoes fuel the idea that it could have been more than just a natural formation. Some have even suggested that the cave's eerie, almost otherworldly atmosphere might be linked to a portal, a passage to other dimensions hidden beneath the surface. It's definitely like something out of a movie. Hidden Beneath the Mexican desert, the Cave of Crystals in Chihuahua is like something straight out of a science fiction movie. Inside, massive crystals, some up to 36 feet long, glow eerily in the dark. Their sheer size and beauty are astonishing, but the crystals are more than just geological wonders. The cave's extreme conditions, temperatures reaching up to 136 degrees Fahrenheit with nearly 100% humidity, makes it nearly impossible for humans to visit without specialized equipment. But here's the really puzzling part. Could these massive, almost otherworldly crystals be more than just natural formations? Some believe that they were deliberately placed there by an ancient civilization, possibly to harness their energy for ritualistic purposes, or perhaps to open gateways to other realms. With their unique properties, such as the ability to amplify energy, the crystals might serve as a key to unlocking interdimensional travel. Are they simply geological wonders, or do they hold the secrets to accessing other realities? It definitely makes you wonder.
Begin our underground journey in China with a series of underground tunnels found in the ancient city of Haochengzui. In 2023, archaeologists were doing excavations in the 4,300-year-old stone city of Haochengzui in Inner Mongolia when they came across a series of tunnels built beneath the city. The city was heavily fortified. In fact, it's ranked as one of the most tightly defended Inner Mongolian stone cities discovered to date. It was almost like the city from Attack on Titan. The inner city was surrounded by an outer city for defense, and outside of that, a walled gatehouse, so a triple defense system. There were also tons of terraces and moats. You were not getting in here easily, and if all defenses did fail, they had the recently discovered underground tunnels to retreat to as well. There were 6 intersecting tunnels about 5 to 20 feet deep that ran under the entire city. Not only would they have been used for extra security, but they also doubled as underground transportation systems connecting various parts of the city, kind of like what we have with underground walkways in cities today.
Next up, we have the newly discovered ancient tunnels of the Pyramid of the Moon, the second largest building in Teotihuacan, found earlier this year in Mexico. The tunnels have remained a secret for nearly 2,000 years, making their discovery groundbreaking in the fields of both history and archaeology. The tunnels are accessible via secret passageway in Plaza de la Luna, located in the center of the city. The passageway is buried 33 feet deep, and it extends from the plaza all the way to the Pyramid of the Moon, where it turns into an elaborate labyrinth of underground tunnels. While no one has been able to enter the tunnels yet, modern technology has given researchers the ability to begin mapping their new discovery. It is believed that the Pyramid of the Moon in its heyday was likely used for religious ceremonies that would have included human sacrifice, which has brought researchers to the conclusion that the tunnels might possibly represent the underworld in accordance with the ancient Teotihuacan belief system. As I said, the tunnels are yet to be explored, but teams are hoping to check them out in the near future to see if they can uncover any hidden artifacts that might give them a more in-depth look into the ancient civilizations of Mexico. So, keep an eye on it.
Next up, we have Derinkuyu, a massive ancient underground city in Turkey. Now, I talked about this place just recently, but what I didn't know was how this place was discovered, and the story is remarkable. Let's just imagine for a moment that you're doing some reno work in your basement and you gotta knock down a wall, but after taking your sledgehammer to it, you notice a small hole. One of your chickens runs into the hole and you chase after it, and you realize, holy crap, this isn't just a small hole, there's actually a full-on tunnel in here. And the tunnel leads to another tunnel and another, until you realize that there is actually an entire underground city right behind your basement. I mean, wait, Narnia? No, it's actually how Derinkuyu was discovered in 1963. This story is true. The 280 feet multi-level complex was built in the 8th to 7th centuries BCE and was once the home of around 20,000 people. Imagine just finding that in your basement. It's nuts. One of the coolest stories I think I've ever read about.
Next up, we have a 4,300 foot long tunnel discovered in 2022 in Egypt, underneath the Temple of Taposiris Magna that might just possibly contain the final resting place of the final ruler of Egypt, Cleopatra. Yes, like James, I have mentioned this one before, but it's frickin' Cleopatra. I can't not talk about it. The temple where the tunnels are located is one dedicated to the god Osiris, also known as the god of the underworld, who symbolizes death, resurrection, and the cycle of Nile floods, which were necessary for agricultural success in Egypt in ancient times. Basically, it's the perfect place for Cleopatra to have been buried. As I said, the tunnels are almost 4.5 thousand feet long. They are also 6.5 feet tall and reside roughly 43 feet underground at the temple located just west of the ancient city of Alexandria, where Cleopatra is believed to have been buried alongside her lover Mark Antony. I mean, you've heard of all roads lead to Rome, but in this case I feel like all tunnels in Osiris's temple will eventually lead to Cleopatra. Statues and ceramics dating back to Cleopatra's time period have also been found in the tunnel, only furthering my personal belief and the belief of many that the tunnels do in fact contain her tomb. And I think sometime this year, maybe next year, we will find out the answer, because I know teams are working really tirelessly on exploring and kind of excavating the entire thing, so get excited.
Orvieto is a beautiful Italian city, but relatively recently, an entire network of ancient tunnels built beneath it came to light, known as the Orvieto Underground. It was something that was kept secret for a long time. Orvieto is built on a volcanic rock called tuff, which is relatively soft and easy to carve, and for thousands of years residents had been digging into this rock, creating an extensive network of underground passages and rooms. In ancient times, these tunnels were used for storing wine and olive oil. The cool, stable temperature underground was perfect for preserving stuff. There are also wells and cisterns that were dug to collect and store water. During medieval times, the underground was used more strategically. The tunnels acted as secret escape routes during sieges and invasions, and some of the caves were even used as bomb shelters during World War II. You can visit the underground tunnels today, but only through guided tours.
Next up, we have the tunnels of Chaban de Hontar, located in the highlands of Peru. Chaban de Hontar is a 3,000-year-old temple, which is impressive in and of itself, but of course it has become even more impressive with the discovery of an elaborate tunnel system located beneath the earth of the temple, believed to have been built sometime between 900 and 200 BC. It is believed that the tunnels hiding underneath Chaban de Hontar were built for ceremonial purposes, such as communicating with the gods, using incredibly advanced engineering techniques that allowed them to channel water and connect the city to the heart of the temple. Many artifacts have been brought up from the tunnels, including bowls and statues, one of which depicts a hybrid human jaguar figure. The discovery, made in the 1940s, has given archaeologists and historians some great insight into the ancient lives of Peruvian citizens.
One of the coolest places you'll visit in Poland is said to be Wieliczka salt mines, aka the underground salt cathedral. This is a huge subterranean complex near Krakow dating back to the 1200s. It's a huge rock salt mine. Rock salt at the time was very precious, and over centuries they transformed the mine into this extensive network of rooms, passageways, and tunnels that go more than 1,000 feet underground. Not only is this a massive underground complex, but it's not as utilitarian as you'd expect either. There's amazing artwork to see here. The miners used the salt crystal deposits to create chapels, chandeliers, statues. One of the most impressive features is a detailed replica of Da Vinci's The Last Supper, all carved from salt. The mine operated for a very long time too, centuries. It only stopped producing salt in 2007, so that's about 700 years of operation. Now it's a tourist destination, and from what I've heard, it is a must-see.
Next up, we're going to Italy, because according to archaeologists, there is an entire ancient underground network of tunnels located directly underneath the royal palace of Naples, built in the 1800s by Ferdinand II of Bourbon, the king of the Two Sicilies, as an escape route for monarchs as well as a passageway for military personnel. The tunnels, which spanned all the way from the barracks to the royal palace, started being built in 1853, but just 2 years later, that all came to a halt when an explosion took place in the area due to a political uprising that would eventually lead to the end of the kingdom of the Two Sicilies. Luckily, construction was picked back up shortly after the incident, and the tunnels were completed on May 25th of that same year, 1855. Ferdinand II of Bourbon died in 1859, and in 1861, the kingdom of the Two Sicilies fell. In the 1900s, the tunnels were used as explosion shelters as well as a place to smuggle contraband until they were closed off. Today, the tunnels have been reopened, and unlike many of the other tunnels on this list, except I believe the one James just mentioned, these tunnels can be visited by the public as part of a tour of the Royal Palace of Naples. If you've been, let me know down below in the comments.
We've all heard of the Colosseum, one of the most famous historical structures in history, the site of countless gladiatorial fights in ancient Rome. It's still around today, one of the most iconic landmarks in the entire world, drawing thousands of visitors each year. But it was only very recently that the tunnels underneath the Colosseum were opened to the public. The massive amphitheater itself is definitely impressive, but the hidden tunnels beneath offer a much deeper look into Roman culture and traditions. These underground passageways were actually where the gladiators would prepare for their fights. It's basically the ancient version of the backstage area of a concert or sports event. For a long time, tourists couldn't access the underground areas, but just in 2021, several of these hidden passageways were restored and opened to the public, which is pretty cool.
And finally, we have possibly my favorite ancient tunnels, the mysterious underground tunnels of Brazil that, no joke, scientists truly believe were created by either giant sloths or giant armadillos. In 2009, a farmer broke through a dry patch of soil into an underground cavity while he was out on the town on his tractor. Researchers were quick to investigate the area, and what they found was, well, pretty insane. An almost 50-foot long tunnel with a diameter of about 6.5 feet. After that, 1,500 more tunnels, including one with branching tunnels that altogether measured in at about 2,000 feet long, were discovered in the area. So, what made them? Well, a geologist by the name of Luis Carlos Weinschutz believes that they are the work of either giant sloths or giant armadillos that lived 10,000 years ago before the mass extinction of megafauna. While scientists are pretty secure in their explanation of what built the tunnels, they're still struggling to figure out why, as the tunnels are much larger than necessary if the animal had intended on using them to escape predators or as shelter in bad weather. Personally, I think the giant animals might have been attempting to create a secret tunnel for two lovers leading to a Mashu, but you know, that's just me. To start off our list today, we're going to take a deep dive into Dudleytown, Connecticut, also known as the town that never existed or the village of the damned. The town was settled in the 1740s and thrived for a while before falling victim to disease, crop failure, and mysterious unexplained death, which began taking place shortly after the Dudley family came to visit. Many villagers believe that the family had arrived with a curse brought from England to damn the residents of the town. So, shortly after the misfortune started, Dudleytown's abandonment began as many villagers fled for their lives in fear. Which was a pretty good call, I guess, because it is said that those who stayed began to slowly descend into the realm of insanity, one by one, with many claiming to have witnessed strange creatures emerging from the forest surrounding the town. Those who enter that same forest today tell of a deafening silence that feels eerily thick and almost suffocating. Reports of aggressive animals along the town's hiking trails, desperate screams coming from the treetops, and the fact that many people and pets have mysteriously gone missing in the area over the years might be a few reasons why the town remains abandoned and illegal to enter to this day, which honestly just makes me wonder what other secrets might be hiding within its historically dark parameters.
Alright, next up we have La Noria in Chile. Now, when I describe this place, it's gonna sound like I'm exaggerating, but I'm really not. There are tons of videos of people exploring this ghost town, and it looks exactly what it sounds like when described. An incredibly creepy abandoned town with bones, some human, a lot human, scattered around the place. Open coffins, crosses everywhere. It's really quite the vibe. This place sits in the Atacama Desert. It was once a bustling mining town, but when the mines dried up, the people started new lives, but their dead were left behind. And as the years went on, people would come to this place and loot it. Even coffins would be opened up, and items like jewelry they'd been buried with would be stolen. So tons of graves now sit out in the open with the bones of the dead still sitting inside of them. So it probably comes as no surprise that people will claim to see some unexplained things going on here, especially at night. Shadowy figures, or even just full-bodied apparitions. And of course, the haunting sounds of the angered spirits are said to echo through the night as well.
Alrighty, next up we have an ancient town with some pretty sadistic sacrificial rituals. Well, not so much a town as a temple in a town, specifically the Moche Temple located in the northwest of Peru. The temple thrived between 100 and 800 AD. The people of the town were known for producing sophisticated goods for their time, including hand-painted pottery made from molds. They also were incredibly advanced when it came to goldworking, monument construction, and city planning. While at one time the town was well known for their advancements, including their incredibly efficient irrigation systems, in 1995 they became known for something a bit different. You see, archaeologists discovered a huge sacrificial gravesite near the temple filled with the bodies of male sacrificial victims who likely did not go willingly. As it is believed, many of them were travelers who met their unfortunate ends while crossing the Moche land in search of their final destinations. Murals on the walls of the temple illustrate the men's final moments, showing them naked and hog-tied before being slaughtered, after which the men's skulls were turned into cups used to collect the BLOOD of the deceased so that it may be offered up as a gift to the gods. Super gross.
Next, we head over to China to discuss Kowloon Walled City. Unlike pretty much every spot on this list, I think this place would have actually been much scarier before it was abandoned. The Kowloon Walled City was this crazy, super dense, and sort of chaotic place in Hong Kong. Picture a bunch of cramped, towering buildings all squished together, a giant concrete jungle. Back in the Song Dynasty around 960 to 1279 AD, there was this cool walled garrison in Kowloon. Over time, it got kind of abandoned, and during the British colonial period, nobody really bothered about it. People just started building random structures within its walls. Fast forward to the 20th century, and it turned into this insane, unplanned mega city within a city. The buildings were like a tangled mess of staircases, pipes, and wires. It became famous for being overcrowded, and it was also basically lawless. The only ones really governing the place were the triads. It was tons of crime, and it was very dark. Because of how dense the place was, it was hard for natural light to even reach the lower levels of the city, so people had to go to the roofs of their buildings to get any light. Eventually, in the 90s, the Hong Kong government decided the place needed to go, and demolition began in March of 1993. Today, though, some of the ruins still remain.
Next up, we've got the Bangar Fort located in Rajasthan, India. The small town was built in the 17th century by an emperor named Madho Singh as a testament of love to his son Man Singh. At its peak, the town was home to over 10,000 people. Today, living in the town is prohibited. And while tourists and locals may visit the ruins during the day, they are strictly banned from entering the area before sunrise and after sunset. And this is because of the fact that since Bangar Fort's re-establishment as an unaltered landmark in the 21st century, people who have entered the premises during these times have often heard or seen dark spirits. And those who have gone into the forts have either turned up dead or just not turned up at all. Because of this, each night before the sun sets, the forts and the grounds are evacuated, locked, and guarded. This is also why the area has earned the title of most haunted place in India. Many believe the haunting is due to a curse placed on the town during its peak by hermit Baba Balu, who was living in the area at the time. Shortly after he declared his curse, a devastating earthquake hit the town, causing its people, along with the people from 83 surrounding villages, to vanish overnight.
Next on the list is Poveglia Island in Italy. This place has a rather ominous nickname, Ghost Island, and that's not just because nobody lives there. This island is basically a mix of a former hospital and a big giant graveyard. So back in the day, during the bubonic plague in the 1700s, which was a very fun time, they used Poveglia as a quarantine spot. It was the place you'd get dumped when you were really sick. And then later on, they built a mental hospital there. So it went from a plague quarantine spot, pretty dark already, to a place where even more horrible things happened because mental hospitals were never pleasant. and the inmates were never treated well. The hospital eventually closed in the 60s, and the island's been abandoned ever since. So many people died on this island that half of the soil is apparently made up of their remains, which is just wild. Today the island is completely off limits because for some reason people need to be told not to go to a place like this.
Next up, we've got Caldara, yet another town in Rajasthan, India with a pretty sordid past. It is said that around 300 years ago, Caldara was quite a prosperous village where townsfolk lived happily and, despite the area's dry agriculture, were able to grow incredibly abundant crops throughout the years. It wasn't until the arrival of a debaucherous prime minister, Salem Singh, that things started to go downhill. When Salem arrived in the town, he set his sights on a beautiful young woman. He claimed he would marry her by any means necessary, including force. He warned the villagers that any attempt to protect the girl and thwart the marriage would result in grave consequences for their lands. And so, the villagers basically said screw it. The entire population of the town, including the young woman that Salem had hoped to marry, left Caldara, but not before they put a dark curse on its barren lands, ensuring that Salem would never be able to reap the ill-earned rewards of what the villagers had sown. To this date, the small town of Caldara remains abandoned, in almost the same state it had been left in so many years ago, minus the fruitful harvests, of course. Those who have visited the ancient grounds have told of dark forces that they feel are determined to protect the uninhabitable status of the area as per the villagers' curse, which had been designed so that no one would ever be able to settle in the area again.
Next on the list, we have the largest contaminated site in the southern hemisphere, Wittenoom, in Western Australia. This town was surrounded by asbestos mines. There were rich asbestos deposits in the surrounding hills, and back in the day, asbestos was in high demand, being used in construction as a fire resistant and for insulation. So the town grew pretty rapidly as miners and their families settled in the area. Wittenoom was a bumping community. There were schools, shops, a movie theater, but as the years went on and concerns about the health risks associated with asbestos exposure began to be a thing, it became pretty obvious that people were living in a death trap. By the 60s and 70s, the health hazards of asbestos became a well-known thing and the demand for it really dried up. The Wittenoom mine closed in 1966, which had pretty much been the sole source of income for the town, and on top of that, the negative health effects were starting to become pretty apparent. By the 2000s, the town had officially been shut down and only a handful of holdouts remained, but as of 2022, there's no one left, and in 2023, the place started getting demolished completely.
Okay, next on our list today we have Cinqo Saltos, an Argentinian town with a pretty dark past, obviously. The area in which the town resides receives very little sunlight, providing it with a quite fittingly dark and gloomy aura year-round. On many occasions, Cinqo Saltos has been referred to as the City of Witches, this being largely due to the fact that, historically, many residents of the area had been dedicated practitioners of black magic, namely necromancy and witchcraft. It is said that in ancient times, witches would often perform occult rituals in the town. One of the more commonly performed was a ritualistic sacrifice of young men and women on the Pellegrini Lake that ran through the center of the town. It is said that to this day, anyone who stands near the lake at night comes to know the disembodied screams of the many victims said to have lost their lives by the river so long ago.
And lastly, we have probably the most apocalyptic looking place on the list, Centralia in Pennsylvania. The town's streets are cracked and smoke constantly rises from the ground. It's hard to believe this place actually exists. It looks like a set from The Walking Dead, but that's because a coal mine fire has been burning beneath the town since 1962. The story begins with a landfill fire, but that was intentionally ignited near an abandoned coal mine entrance. Unfortunately, the fire unexpectedly spread to the coal mines beneath the town, creating a continuous underground blaze that just hasn't stopped, and this has caused some problems, primarily all the sinkholes. Imagine a sinkhole opening up with fire spewing out of it, like you'd think you were literally being dragged into hell. So yeah, people don't live here anymore, shocker. Most of the buildings have now been demolished. In the 80s, the US government allocated funds to relocate the remaining residents, and the local zip code was discontinued. And we're starting off the list with a pretty amazing civilization, the Indus. They existed from around 3300 BCE to 1300 BCE in what is now Pakistan and northwest India. It's often called one of the world's oldest civilizations, but they were pretty advanced. They had sanitation systems that wouldn't be matched until the Roman times, which is pretty crazy. They had busy cities with well-planned streets, houses, and even indoor bathrooms, apparently. Two major cities, Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, are probably the most well-known. These cities had intricate brickwork, drainage systems, and there's evidence of a written script that we haven't even been able to fully decipher to this day. These folks were not just good at city building, they were also savvy traders. The Indus people traded with Mesopotamia, using boats to transport goods. Agriculture was a big deal too, with well-irrigated fields for growing crops. But around 1300 BCE, the civilization started to fall off. We're not entirely sure why. Some think it could be due to climate change affecting their water sources, so people up and left migrating southeast. Today, all that's left of the ancient city of Angkor in Cambodia is Angkor Wat, this beautiful temple complex, which also happens to be the largest religious structure in the entire world. Yeah, it's pretty remarkable, and as large as it is, it's still only just one part of a city that used to be larger than modern-day New York City. Angkor, the capital of the Khmer Empire. This place had magnificent temples, including Angkor Wat, so you can only imagine how many more amazing structures there were, considering how vast this place was. But around the 15th century, the city declined and was eventually abandoned. There may have been environmental stress here. The complex irrigation system may have strained resources, causing soil depletion and impacting food production. There could have also been prolonged droughts that affected their ability to support a large population. Researchers aren't exactly sure how many people lived there, of course, but considering the size, there were probably a lot. And there were also power struggles and invasions, which weakened the Khmer Empire, eventually leading to the decline of their largest city, followed by the empire itself about 300 years later. This next civilization was also pretty incredible, but things didn't end quite as smoothly for them as the first point on this list. Rather than people just moving and settling somewhere else because of issues with agriculture, it looks like things ended pretty violently for the Anasazi. The Anasazi were an ancient Native American people who lived in the Four Corners region of the United States, where Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico meet. They were skilled builders, creating these impressive homes that were carved into the sides of cliffs. These dwellings were kind of like the skyscrapers of their time. They towered over everything else in the region until the 1880s, when actual skyscrapers came into play. But for as advanced as they were, things did not end well. The theory is that they were dealing with a long-term drought, and deforestation was happening too. They were using up a lot of wood, probably for building and cooking. Add water management issues to the mix, and it's easy to see why things started to fall apart. Tensions rose due to desperation, and that's what likely led to violent conflicts. And by around 1300 AD, the Anasazi had mostly dispersed. Next on the list, we have the Rapa Nui civilization on Easter Island. This is the island with all those amazing stone statues known as moai. The fact that they were able to carve these things out of volcanoes and then transport the 14-ton behemoths around the island is a pretty incredible feat. For a long time, it was a complete mystery as to how they actually did it, but it turns out they would have used a system of ropes with a team pulling the statues back and forth, making the moai kind of like walk. It's pretty cool. So what went wrong with the Rapa Nui? Well, scientists dug into the dirt, looking at ancient charcoal pieces and pollen in the soil, found that the Rapa Nui had chopped down almost every tree on the island. Then rats on the island were eating the tree seeds before new trees could grow, so the forest was completely wiped out. Without trees, the people lost their ability to make rope and canoes, and apparently they started burning grass to make fire. This was all pretty bad, and you can bet tensions were high, and things would have gotten even worse when Europeans showed up in 1722. The first Europeans to set foot on Easter Island, you know, they did their thing. They didn't come in peace. It's about as classic as it gets, unfortunately. And if that wasn't enough, by the 1870s, waves of smallpox and a major Peruvian slave raid hit the Rapa Nui, and these were the last nails in the coffin for the already small population on the island. Next up are the Mississippians. The Mississippians were a group of Native American societies that thrived in the southeastern United States from around 800 to 1600 AD. They were known for building these complex societies with impressive mounds, and Cahokia was one of their biggest and most impressive cities. This place, located near present-day St. Louis, Missouri, was the largest pre-Columbian settlement north of Mexico. At its peak, it had a population of around 20,000 people, possibly even double that. It had enormous earthen mounds, including the famous Monk's Mound, which is still one of the largest man-made earthen mounds in North America, but it eventually fell. Around the late 13th century, the population began to dwindle, and by the 14th century, the city was largely abandoned. Nature slowly reclaimed the area. It's not very clear what led to the decline. There aren't explicit records from that time, but it was probably a combination of things, environmental and economic. Next on the list are the people of the Nabta Playa. So Nabta Playa is a dry lake bed located in the Nubian desert of southern Egypt. It has these archaeological remains dating back to around 10,000 to 6,000 years ago during the Neolithic period. The people who once lived here left behind evidence of their advanced understanding of astronomy and agriculture. They erected a stone circle kind of similar to the Stonehenge in England, which seems to be what they used to map the stars. Some archaeologists think these stone formations worked as an ancient kind of calendar, but other than the stone circles they left behind, we really don't know a whole lot about the people of Nabta Playa. Archaeologists and historians are still trying to piece together their daily lives, social structures, and what ultimately happened to them. The site seems to have been abandoned around 5,000 years ago, but the lack of written records from that time period, it makes it tough to pinpoint the exact reasons behind their disappearance. Next up, we have Çatalhöyük. Çatalhöyük in central Turkey is not only one of the first known urban settlements in the world, but also one of the strangest. So instead of streets like you have with most cities, I mean every city, here all the homes and buildings were connected, and to get around, people walked along the paths on roofs and then descended down into their homes with ladders. Looking at images of the place, it looks almost like a big ginormous honeycomb type of formation. It's very unique. There aren't really any places like it. There were also no cemeteries. Residents buried their dead underneath their own homes. The fate of its inhabitants is still mysterious, which isn't surprising considering how ancient it is. But around 6700 BCE, the site was abandoned, and researchers are still piecing together the reasons behind it. The ancient city of Thonis, which now sits at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. I love ancient underwater cities. There's just something so beautiful but eerie about them at the same time. So Thonis was an Egyptian city located near the mouth of the Nile River. It was one of the most important port cities in ancient Egypt, a thriving port city during the time of the pharaohs, a center for trade with Greece and other Mediterranean countries, and it played a big role in the Egyptian economy. The city had these grand temples and statues dedicated to the various gods and goddesses of ancient Egypt, but then it sank. There were probably natural disasters like earthquakes, and of course the sea levels rose, and for centuries this place was lost and forgotten until underwater archaeologists discovered its ruins in 2000, with divers finding well-preserved artifacts like statues, pottery, and religious objects. Alright, we gotta talk about it. The lost city of Atlantis. Atlantis was a legendary city first mentioned by the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, and according to Plato, Atlantis was this powerful and advanced civilization that existed around 9,000 years before his own time, so that's about 11,000 years ago from today. But it's still a complete mystery as to whether or not this place really did exist. A lot of uppity scientists say it didn't, but they also sound very not fun. It's said that Atlantis had a sophisticated government, advanced technology, and a prosperous economy. The Atlanteans were described as this powerful, warlike people who eventually became corrupt and decadent, leading the gods to punish them by submerging their island beneath the sea in a single day and night. The exact location of Atlantis is still unknown, and there are a lot of archaeologists that figure Atlantis The whole story behind it was really just a legend and an allegory rather than an actual place. Some of the rumored locations, though, range from the Mediterranean to Antarctica, but there's never been any definitive physical evidence of its existence. And finally, of course, we have the Maya, who created some of the most incredible architecture and artwork of any known ancient civilization. And not only were their cities and artwork spectacular, but their knowledge about astronomy was unparalleled for the time. But around the 9th and 10th centuries, their cities, which once bustled with life, started to empty out, and that's always been a mystery as to why. It's hard to pinpoint an exact cause because parts of the civilization fell at various times. It was a wide-stretching civilization with various languages and practices across the board, but there are some ideas as to what happened. Environmental stress is usually a big factor. Could have been droughts or crop failures. Another thing could be overpopulation. Resources could have started running thin, and when there's overpopulation, there's more violence. Not a great recipe for a peaceful society. There might have been some political problems as well, with rulers losing control, causing internal conflicts. One of the most mind-blowing lost cities is Dwarka, an ancient city said to be submerged beneath the waters of the Arabian Sea. The legend goes that Dwarka was the home of Lord Krishna, and it was a grand city with incredible architecture. The belief is that Dwarka sank around 5,000 years ago, but recently scientists discovered underwater ruins that may place the city further back in history than they thought before. Archaeologists found what looks like streets, walls, massive stone structures all under the sea. And what's interesting is that these ruins line up with descriptions from ancient texts. Some believe that the city was a center for trade and culture, possibly one of the most advanced civilizations of its time. These ruins could potentially be evidence of a civilization far ahead of its time. Some even think that Dwarka was a city with advanced technology and that, kind of like Atlantis, it was all lost in a cataclysmic event like an earthquake or a flood. The lost city of Ubar, also known as the Atlantis of the Sands, described in ancient texts as a city of incredible wealth and power, Ubar was said to be located somewhere in the Arabian desert. According to the stories, the city was a trading hub known for its luxurious palaces and riches, but then one day it vanished, and supposedly it was swallowed up by the desert itself. For centuries, no one could find any concrete evidence that it ever existed. But in the 1990s, something amazing happened. Using satellite imagery and modern technology, scientists and archaeologists discovered what looked like the remains of a large city buried deep in the desert. The ruins seemed to match the descriptions of Ubar, massive structures, intricate roadways, but is it the actual city or something else altogether? There's still a lot of debate. Yonaguni, the sunken city off the coast of Japan. At least some say it's a sunken city. This place is wild though. It's an underwater site that was discovered in 1986 by a diver named Kihachiro Aritake, and what he found were all these massive stone formations that look like they could have been part of an ancient city. Steps, walls, and terraces all sitting deep underwater. But the thing is, no one can agree on whether it was constructed by humans or just natural rocks shaped by the ocean. Some people think it's the remains of a city that sank thousands of years ago, and saying that the stone formations look way too precise to be a coincidence, like there's no way nature could have made all these flat surfaces and stair-like steps on its own. On the flip side though, others say it is just natural erosion, nothing more than weird rocks shaped by water over a long period of time. And whether it's the remains of an ancient city or not though, Yonaguni still attracts divers and scientists from all over the world. At the end of the day, the place just looks cool. The lost city of Kalahari is one of the most interesting mysteries in African exploration. The story begins in 1885 when a Canadian adventurer and showman named William Leonard Hunt, going by Guillermo Farini as his stage name, ventured deep into the Kalahari Desert. On his return to the west, he published a book describing these strange rock formations he believed were ruins of a long-lost city. He even presented evidence to the Royal Geographical Society, including photos of what he thought were ancient structures hidden in the desert. Farini described the site as a desolate place with half-buried ruins, massive stones, and what appeared to be tombs or temples. Over the years, there were expeditions, with over 25 in 1932 alone, but none found any definitive proof of the city. In the 60s, a researcher named A.J. Clement proposed a new theory that Farini never actually reached the heart of the Kalahari. Instead, Clement believed the so-called ruins that he talked about were just natural rock formations that, due to erosion, looked like straight-edge stones and walls. But that's just his theory. Could there really have been a long-lost city somewhere in the Kalahari Desert? Akrotiri was found on the Greek island of Santorini. The city was completely wiped out by one of the largest volcanic eruptions in history. The eruption buried it under volcanic ash, which was horrific, but it also ended up preserving it like a time capsule. The city was incredibly advanced for its time. Archaeologists have uncovered well-preserved buildings with multi-story structures, advanced plumbing systems. The eruption, which scientists believe happened around 1600 BCE, left the city completely buried and its people vanished without a trace. Some believe that the eruption was the inspiration behind the legend of Atlantis, with its advanced civilization being swallowed up by the sea in an instant. Agartha is said to be a hidden advanced city deep beneath the surface of the earth. The idea comes from ancient legends, but it really became more popular in the 20th century, especially with people who are into esoteric beliefs and conspiracy theories. It ties into the hollow earth theory quite a bit. Some people think Agartha is an underground utopia where highly advanced civilizations have lived for thousands of years. The story goes that Agartha is connected by a network of tunnels that stretches all around the planet. Some say it's home to ancient beings with knowledge and technologies far beyond what we have. Stories about Agartha usually involved lost civilizations, UFOs, and secret government cover-ups are also said to be involved. Some believe that famous explorers like Admiral Byrd might have even visited, and that the knowledge of its existence has been suppressed for one reason or another. Troy, made famous by Homer's Iliad, is one of the most legendary cities in ancient history. The stories are packed with gods meddling in human affairs, heroes like Achilles, and of course, that famous wooden horse. But aside from all the fantastical elements, archaeologists believe that there's some truth behind the myths. Rustem Aslan, the director of excavations at the site, says, "I believe the Trojan War was a historical event, just not the kind that Homer described." Over the last 150 years of digging at the site, researchers have uncovered that Troy was occupied for over 4,000 years. During the Late Bronze Age, which lines up with the time Homer's Trojan War, the city's inhabitants were clearly preparing for something big, most likely a war. Now, while we still haven't found definitive proof of the epic battle described in the Iliad, Aslan is confident that it's out there, buried deep under 65 feet of dirt. So even though the gods might not have played a part in it, the city itself was a real and powerful place. Alright, so not really a city, but a mythological castle and court. Camelot, a legendary castle at the heart of the King Arthur tales, is a name that most of us recognize from Hollywood films and stories that have been retold countless times. King Arthur, the noble king, and his band of knights are the stuff of legend. But the question is, was Camelot real? Well, over the centuries, historians have dug into this. In 1542, poet John Leland suggested that Cadbury Castle in Somerset might be the real Camelot. Why? Well, it's close to the River Cam and villages named Queen Cam and West Camel, which seems like a pretty close link to Camelot. And during the 20th century, archaeologists dug into that area. Their findings were pretty interesting. They found evidence of a settlement going back to the 4th millennium BCE, and a major fortification built around 470 CE. It was massive, the largest of its time. It seemed to fit the story of a powerful ruler, possibly Arthur, fortifying his kingdom, but not everyone buys into the Cadbury Castle theory. Some historians think that the site was built too late to match the Camelot of Arthurian legend, and other places like Cornwall and Huddersfield have also been theorized as possible locations for Camelot. El Dorado is one of the most famous legends of all time, and it all started with a story about a tribal chief. So back in the 16th century, the Spanish explorers heard about a leader who would cover himself in gold and jewels and then dive into Lake Guatavita as part of a ritual. He was believed to be the key to untold wealth, and the story quickly grew in the minds of the Spanish, and what started as a tale about one man became a search for an entire city and then a whole empire said to be filled with gold. The Spanish couldn't get enough, and they scoured the lands of modern-day Colombia, Venezuela, and Brazil, convinced that they'd one day find this golden city, but they never found a trace of El Dorado. That doesn't mean the legend was completely made up, though. There are records of an Incan tribe near Lake Guatavita who had a ceremony where leaders would drop gold and jewels into the water as an offering. It's possible that the original legend about El Dorado was based on this ritual, and over time, it just got wildly exaggerated into the search for a city full of riches. Sadly, the Spanish pursuit of El Dorado led to the destruction of many indigenous tribes too, as they searched for a place that might never have existed in the first place. Göbekli Tepe is one of the most mind-blowing ancient sites in the world. Found in Turkey, it's a massive archaeological complex that's over 12,000 years old, making it older than Stonehenge or the Great Pyramid. It's a giant ceremonial site with massive pillars, some weighing up to 20 tons, and detailed carvings of animals like snakes, boars, and foxes. This wasn't just a place for regular people to live, it was more of a religious or spiritual center. Scientists believed it was built by hunter-gatherers, not advanced civilizations. The fact that people without farming or settled communities could create something this sophisticated does change what we thought we knew about early human history. What makes it even more mysterious is that after it was built, it was intentionally buried around 8,000 years ago. No one really knows why it was buried or who did it, but it's kept the site hidden and preserved for thousands of years. The site's original excavator, Klaus Schmidt, believed it was ritualistically refilled, but it turns out that's probably not the case. More recent studies have shown that it was most likely the result of landslides.
Kicking off our list at number 10. Athens, Greece. Of course, Athens is the largest city in Greece, and of course, if the Olympics are any indication, Athens is quite old. It's been around for a while. People have been hucking javelins for quite a few years. One of the oldest cities in the world, being inhabited for around 7,000 years. Yeah, not bad. It was once a powerful city-state and the birthplace of democracy, which is a little less exciting than the Olympics, but still rather cool. Exploring the city today can be quite exciting. Some ancient cities are in rough areas of the world, but to visit Greece, learn about ancient democracy and ancient Olympics, then go swim in beautiful water, it's amazing. It's the best trip ever. Ancient empires like the Romans, Byzantine, and the Ottomans, they also settled in this ancient city as well, so a lot of history to go around. Ancient Greeks also used to work out naked. That's just a fun fact that I wanted to share with the world. The word gymnasium translates to the Greek term gymnasion, which meant school for naked exercise. So I ask, what would you prefer? Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters or Nico's School for Naked Exercise? It's 50-50. Number 9. Ray, Iran. Ray is the oldest city in the province and one of the oldest cities on the planet, with evidence of inhabitants going back as far as 6,000 BC. It's like 8,000 years ago. I can't even fathom that. The Avesta are these ancient scriptures of Zoroastrianism. Now, Arabs took control of the city in 641 AD, and it was almost destroyed by the Mongols later in 1220. Now, somehow, after all of that, there's still historical monuments that still stand to this day. And that includes the 12th century Tigral Tower and an excavation site where 7,000-year-old artifacts were initially discovered. That's so old. Number 8. Fayum, Egypt. We kicked our list off with ancient Greece, so it's only a matter of time before we get into some ancient Egyptian goodness. The oldest city in Egypt, and one of the oldest in Africa, is the city Fayum. Fayum was founded around 4000 BC, and it's located 62 miles southwest of Cairo. Now, Fayum is in a historical spot. It's located in an area that was once the ancient city of Crocodilopolis, whose inhabitants once worshipped a sacred crocodile named Pashukos. How amazing is that? I feel like the pyramids and the tombs in Cairo are all the talk, but Fayum? It's an ancient relic. Go there instead. Today, the Fayum is home to markets, mosques, and baths. Worth a visit if you're doing a big trip. Don't forget about sacred crocodiles when planning your itinerary. Pyramids, then crocodiles. 1, 2, boom. Number 7. Helike, Turkey. According to Greek legend, Helike was a place that was destroyed by Poseidon himself, aka the god of the sea, storms, earthquakes, and horses. See, what happened was he was upset because those who resided in Helike were refusing to give their statue of Poseidon, or even a copy of it, to the Ionian colonists in Asia Minor, which is now now modern-day Turkey. Our modern archaeology, along with ancient sources, have been able to deduce that an earthquake in 373 BC caused the ground beneath the entire city to completely liquefy, which is, well, that's horrifying. And then from here on, a tsunami then hit and totally engulfed the city, and it's said that this all happened in the span of 1 or 2 hours, which sadly left no survivors. In the 1980s and 1990s, under the direction of archaeologist Dora Katsanapopoulou and physicist Steven Suter, a more accurate location of where Helike may be came to light in 2001, and the ancient city was finally located. Number 6. Caral, Peru. An American history professor named Paul Kossak was absolutely fascinated by ancient settlements, as many of us are. But this passion led him to devoting much of his time to studying in Peru, which has, well, such an incredibly rich history already. In 1948, while in Peru, Paul made the discovery that he's been waiting for his entire life. He came across the dry remains of an ancient city. The remains were carbon dated and placed back to around 5,000 years old. The city of Caral was once home to around 3,000 inhabitants pre-Inca. This was already a thriving location while the pyramids were being built. That's how old the settlement is. It appeared to be quite a peaceful place as there were no obvious signs of battles or weapons, but among the remains were homes, plazas, temples, and an amphitheater, so pretty nice stuff, all things considered. It's said the city was abandoned in 2000 BC, and in 2009 AD, it was made a World Heritage Site. Number 5. Machu Picchu, Peru. For this one, we have another one of the most famous and well-known lost cities, Machu Picchu. This site was built over 500 years ago, and it was once known as the lost city of the Inca until the modern discovery of it in 1911 by archaeologist Hiram Bingham changed the game. Him and his team actually stumbled upon an ancient city almost accidentally. They were looking for another ancient city, and then they found another one. That's kind of a win, I don't know, or a loss, not really sure. Machu Picchu was built by the incredible Incas who have surprised us in our modern times. Many times with their unbelievable technology or abilities that they had all those years ago, somehow we're still uncovering secrets. It's believed that this place may have been built for the Inca emperor as a sort of estate almost. See, Machu Picchu was built in 1450, but it was abandoned about a century later at the time of the Spanish conquest. And as of 2007, it has been voted one of the new 7 wonders of the world, and work continues to be done on it to maintain and restore this wonderful location. Number 4. Pompeii, Italy. One of the most famous lost cities of all time, the Roman city of Pompeii was sadly destroyed in 79 AD when the eruption of Mount Vesuvius just went off, and then volcanic ash was then strewn about the city. It's horrible. It's one of the worst things I can think of. Fast forward all the way to 1748 when the Duke of Naples had a summer palace built just 24 kilometers south of Naples on Italy's west coast. Through the construction, as those working on the palace began to dig, they started to come across buildings and streets, and from here on, once news spread, people began to flock into the area, and it was realized what had been uncovered was a lost city, the lost city of Pompeii. Again, you just find an entire city, like, hey, I found a road under here. What's this about? Fascinating. Throughout the Victorian times, people would come and see as more of this town was uncovered, and eventually they found an amphitheater, a forum, houses, and shops. Everything you'd expect a town to have, really. This one was just, covered in hot lava, so untouched for a little bit. Number 3. Skara Brae. This is an area that is located in Scotland, and it was found in an exceptionally surprising way. In 1850, there was this huge storm that hit Scotland, and it was so bad that around 200 people passed away from it. It was terrible. Now, the next day, however, once the storm had eventually passed, residents of the Orkney Isles began to notice that part of a cliff had dislodged, but it uncovered a sort of hidden settlement almost, which is insane. It's like some Zelda temple. We're like, what is this in this isle? Tests were able to date this site back from 3200 BC to 2200 BC, and it was shown to have been inhabited for around 600 years. There were round stone homes there, and the roofs were made of whalebone and peat. It was pretty creative. The design of this little city suggested that there wasn't a hierarchy, but rather a group of people living peacefully as farmers, or herdsmen, or traders, or anything not involving battle. You know what I mean? While the site is small, it's pretty mighty. The houses are in quite great shape for the amount of time that has passed. This little settlement in Europe is the most complete Neolithic village, and while it's older than Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids, it's been called the Scottish Pompeii because of how well preserved it is. Number 2. Sigiriya. In 1831, it is said that Major Jonathan Forbes of the 78th Highlanders of the British Army was on horseback, and on his way back from a journey, that's when he spotted the bush-covered summit of Sigiriya. In the 1890s, archaeological work slowly began on the site, but Harry Charles Purvis Bell, way too long of a name, was really the person who began to start large-scale work on this area. The Cultural Triangle Project, which was launched by the government of Sri Lanka, began to really focus their attention on Sigiriya in 1982, and for the first time, archaeological work began on the entire city. It took a little while, but we got there. Basically, the city consists of an ancient citadel that was built by King Kashyapa in the 5th century. There's an upper palace on the top of the rock and a mid-level terraces. There are moats and walls and gardens that extend out from the base of the rock as well. The location once served as a palace and fortress, but it was abandoned after the king's death. And finally, number 1, Mohenjo-Daro. This is a location whose name is said to roughly translate to a mound of the dead's men. This is one of the world's oldest urban settlements, as it was found and built somewhere around 2600 to 2500 BC. and what is now Pakistan. But it was abandoned as the civilization that called this place home declined. For almost 4,000 years, this site was seemingly forgotten about and the remains of it were undocumented until an officer of the Archaeological Survey of India, R.D. Banerjee, visited the site in 1920 and found a flint scraper, which then convinced him of the site's rich history. And from here, excavations of the site began, and as the 1980s kicked off, it was named a World Heritage Site officially.